Hello, and today I'll be explaining Hashima Island, known as just Hashima, but more awesomely by the locals as Gunkanjima, or Battleship Island. But why exactly is it called that? Well, the Shima or Jima suffix on Japanese places indicates an island, which is why island is redundant on Hashima Island, border island, and Gunkanjima as well. That's why Shima and Jima pop up in other places like Hiroshima and Iwo Jima, and Fukushima and Takeshima and Aejima and Nekojima? Yeah, but why is Battleship in the name? Well, brace yourselves, because Battleship Island is called Battleship Island because it looks almost exactly like a battleship. Which is cool, right? And, I think that's about it. Thanks for watching, I guess. Did you like this video? If so, then leave a like, if you want, I guess. And something's wrong. Making a video is never this easy, and it certainly isn't this time, as it turns out Hashima has an interesting past involving Mitsubishi, atomic warfare, coal, slavery, and the densest permanent population of its time. Before that population abandoned the island, permanently, but maybe not forever. Anyway, Hashima as an island is located less than 5 kilometers off the coast of Kyushu in southwest Japan, and only 15 kilometers from the now thriving city of Nagasaki, which is a name that should ring a few bells, especially if you're American. Hashima was likely formed extremely recently, within the last dozen thousand years. Hell, the sea it sits on was only formed about 15 million years ago, which sounds like a long time, but on a geologic timescale, it is really new. These rocks here are 27 times older than that. Stupid rocks. The history we really care about starts in 1890, when the Mitsubishi Corporation, which you may know for its cars, but back then did basically everything, bought the entire island. This sounds a bit excessive, but it really isn't, for two main reasons. Firstly, Japan has 6,851 more islands, so it's not like there's a shortage, and secondly, coal deposits had been discovered 3 years earlier on that island. In this massive period of industrial revolution, not only for Japan but for the entire world, the main driving force behind it and fuel for it was coal, and as a result coal was hugely prized and sought after, to the point where you could just buy an island with deposits, then build a tunnel under the sea to collect the coal, and chuck as many workers as you could on the island to make as much money as possible. That's exactly what Mitsubishi did. But that also involves building the infrastructure and housing to cope with this massive and still growing population. So the island was completely urbanized, with concrete sea walls, huge tower blocks, the first ever sizable concrete building in Japan was built on the island, as well as reclaiming land from the sea to make more space for industry. The island you see here is nearly 4 times as big as the original island. At this point, the rectangular shape of the mostly artificial island started to look to people on shore like a massive battleship. In fact, not just any battleship, one battleship in particular. The Tosa. Built in nearby Nagasaki in 1921, the accidental resemblance was so uncanny that the nickname for Hashima as Gunkanjima, or Battleship Island, stuck, even longer than the ship did. It sunk in the Battle of Midway in 1942. But anyway, along with industry, the massive population also included the families of workers, wives and children. So on the island were schools, shops, nurseries, cinemas, and thoroughfares with hives of activity. The population continued to increase through the 20s and 30s, but things take a dark turn with the start of World War II. As you may or may not know, in warfare, enemy soldiers or even civilians from the opposing force can be captured and held as POWs, or prisoners of war. The Geneva Convention has this thing covered, as they often do, with the rights POWs have, the conditions they can and can't be kept in, and generally how you should treat them. Japan agreed to these conditions in 1929, if war were to happen, which, spoilers, it did. And in the Sino-Japanese War and in the Pacific Theatre, they took their fair share of Chinese, British, Australian, and American POWs. However, during warfare, Japan didn't really keep to the agreements set forth in the 1929 Geneva Agreement, and often abused POWs captured by them. The most famous case of Japanese abuse during warfare is the 1937-38 Nanking Massacre, also known as the Rape of Nanking. Basically, when Japanese forces captured the massive city and then capital of the People's Republic of China, Nanking, they took part in pillaging, arson, and looting of the city, which isn't allowed, and also the violent rape and murder of its citizens, which is definitely not allowed. It is difficult to get a precise figure, as it often is, but experts estimate over 20,000 women were raped and assaulted over the first 6 weeks of occupation, and the killing of 60,000 to 300,000 soldiers and civilians took place. To this day, some Japanese officials and citizens deny the existence of the rape of Nanking, despite soldiers' testimonies and physical evidence to the contrary. I'm sorry I brought that up. That's gonna put a dampener on the rest of the video, overshadow quite a few things, and has probably got me a few dislikes and a warring comment section. But that's just an example, the worst example of POW treatment. Chinese, Korean, and to a lesser extent other POWs were forced to work and mine for coal on the island, in terrible conditions, breaking many of the Geneva Conventions. This seems tiny compared to what we've just talked about, but the harsh treatment and form of modern slavery the POWs on Gunkanjima under the Mitsubishi Corporation went through does not deserve to be ignored. I should also mention the nuking of Nagasaki didn't really do much. VJ Day came and went and the POWs were eventually repatriated, but even despite these people leaving the island, the population kept growing. In its peak in 1959, the population was 5,259 on the 63,000 square metre island, giving a population density of nearly 84,000 people per square kilometre, a figure that would later that century be surpassed by Kowloon walled city with a density of 1.2 million per square kilometre, despite the fact that Kowloon was less than a third of the size of Hashima. However, in 1959 Hashima was denser, don't worry about it. But then, as seems to happen to every dense civilization, things start to fall apart. Not literally, yet, but economically. The main reason the islands were inhabited, to mine coal, was starting not to make economic sense anymore, as Japan was slowly replacing coal fuel with petrol and oils. All across Japan, and all across the world actually, mines were closing down, to the dismay of many of the workers, cough cough, north of England, cough cough. Gunkanjima was and is no exception. In 1974, Mitsubishi gave up on coal extractions and abandoned the island, unemploying or moving the workers to another mine on shore. Very quickly, the crowded metropolis turned into a ghost city, and has remained empty ever since. Today, Battleship Island, an island constructed of concrete and steel, is slowly being taken over by nature. The isolation and abandonment means we can observe what happens to buildings which are without maintenance for so long. With regard to corrosion and vegetation, the island was given over to a local town in 2002 by Mitsubishi since they weren't using it anymore, and 3 years later that town was absorbed by Nagasaki City, and today the complex is administered by Nagasaki. But as a result of that, tourism has started. Since April 2009, you can buy a trip and a guided tour around a significant portion of the island, but if you can't afford it or aren't going to Japan, Google have also added Hashima Island to Google Street View, which is awesome, go check that out. Now, this entire time, if you've been wondering why this abandoned setting looks familiar, it's because you've probably seen the James Bond film Skyfall. Remember this guy? Yeah, his evil base is inspired by and partially filmed in the ruins of Gunkanjima, though for me, I first learnt about the Battleship Island on the History Channel's programme, Life After People, which is basically a representation of what would happen to society and infrastructure if humans just disappeared and stopped maintaining anything. Kind of like what happened to Battleship Island. It's worth checking out for the engineering alone, but if you're not really into that sort of thing, it does show a lot of buildings collapsing, so check it out if you want. And so that's the story of Hashima, Battleship Island, and until next time, thank you for watching.